Thanks, Agar, and also from my side, welcome to everyone. I'm the gamer in our team, so for me, this is clearly the most exciting session. I'm heavily biased on this one. Maybe to warm up a little bit the topic that we're going to talk about, I wanted to go a little bit back in time and think about, like exposure of most people my generation to gaming. And when I thought about this, it's like I started my journey in gaming myself a little bit less than 25 years ago. And that meant being in elementary school, being 6 years old and playing Pokemon on a Game Boy device back in the days. And in fact, this was so popular at my generation that we ended up having more than 50% of kids in my school, like basically spending like all available time they had playing this game on their Game Boys. And it reached a point when our school actually was so fed up with it that they completely banned any electronic devices. So not just gaming, it was also MP3 players and such, just completely from school. And in hindsight, I can hardly think of a better example of what a genuine product market fit looks like. And I think this is important to stress, especially in times of recession, because for us as early stage investors, product market fit is the holy grail of what innovation in the end of the day is all about. And in the 25 years that followed, I think it's evident that the gaming industry has continuously pushed the boundaries of what's possible with technology. So when we think back 25 years, we had Game Boys with just a few pixels. 25 years later, we talk about immersive 3D experiences with 4K graphics. That's quite a strong technological push in such a short amount of time. When it comes to gamers, of course, that also reflects in their behaviors when it comes to games. So we already see since more than a decade, since online multiplayer gaming has become a thing, the way gamers spend their money has also significantly changed. And so for anyone, independent from crypto or not crypto, that has still doubts about the philosophical argument of if virtual assets actually exist or make sense, I would advise them to just observe what has happened in gaming since more than a decade. And there's plenty of games ranging from GTA, Fortnite, Minecraft, Roblox, and hundreds of others. They make in some cases each billions and billions of dollars every single year, not just for buying the game, as we used to 20 years ago with our Game Boy cassettes, but actually just for spending money for virtual items within the games. And this is something that so far was not related to crypto, and it already had product market fit, clearly. But with the emergence of Web3 technology, we suddenly have a completely new way of means of defining ownership of virtual assets. And that creates a lot of new opportunities for gamers and developers alike. And with that being said, I would like to introduce you to our guests today, because together we want to discuss what the next few years might bring for gaming and Web3 specifically, maybe lessons learned, things to be excited about, realistic timeframes to what expect at what points of time. Each of them come from very different perspectives within the Web3 community, so I think we will gain a lot of insights of where this industry might be moving, in especially the short to the midterm. And starting from the left to my right, it brought a bit my order together, but like we managed anyways. So to my left, we start with Sebastien Borget. Very familiar face that most of you probably already recognized from Metaverse use cases and gaming, especially within the Web3 communities. He's the co-founder and CEO of Sandbox, which is with more than 4 million wallet users and over 23,000 unique landowners, one of the leading Metaverse platforms at this point in time. The Time magazine, in fact, even called it one of the 100 most influential companies of last year. And on top of that, Sebastien is the president of the Blockchain Gaming Alliance, which provides him with additional insights into Web3 adoption in the gaming community. So welcome, Sebastien.
Thank you, and thanks for bringing so much great memories from our childhood.
Absolutely, absolutely. Welcome. And then next we have Dyer, who is the CEO of Zilliqa. Zilliqa is a layer 1 blockchain protocol that has actively pushed its efforts to expand its influence in the gaming sphere more recently. One second. They also joined the Blockchain Gaming Alliance, so same as Sebastien, and they closed plenty of partnerships with gaming companies quite recently. And they're also rumored to have plans to want to release their own hardware gaming device in 2023, which is quite interesting. And maybe Matt can tell us a little bit more about that in just a minute. So welcome, Matt.
Thanks for having me, and I am actually the worst gamer in the whole of Zilliqa.
That's okay, as long as everyone else is more hardcore gaming than you, then that's fine. And then next we have Gopi Kannappan, who's the Chief Product Officer at bitsCrunch, a blockchain analytics and forensics company that specializes in multi-chain insights for NFTs and digital assets. So this is also something that's quite relevant in the gaming space, especially in the future, thinking that most gaming assets that I just talked about could be represented by NFTs and such. The company was backed in 2022 by some of the most prominent investors in the Web3 space, including Animoca Brands, Coinbase Ventures, Chainlink, Polygon, and alike. So welcome also, Gopi.
Yep, thanks a lot.
And last but not least, we have Tim Dierckxsens, co-founder and CEO of a company called Venly. Is a leading Web3 company that provides the technology stack for wallet solutions, NFTs, and marketplace integrations. Venly has been a key player in the Web3 and gaming community for over more than 2 years. And as a personal side note, it's actually been the first deal that I've been backing as a VC in my career 3 years ago in early 2020. So also to you, Tim, welcome. Nice to have you here.
Thanks for having me and thanks for the support.
And to kick off the session, maybe with the first question. So we had, I think, all quite some time to reflect of what happened in 2020 over the Christmas break and New Year's Eve. And maybe we can start with, if you all imagine like going 1 year back in time, like early 2022, and looking back on the perspective you might have had back then from today's perspective, for each of you, what do you think what has surprised you this year and what went as expected in the industry from your perspective? Maybe to start with you, Sebastien.
All right. Okay, let's break the glass. So you'll be surprised, I guess. My answer is like things went pretty much like I expected. Like if you look at my prediction toward December 2021 on the article online, I'd see we'll start more and more entrepreneurs and founders jump in the space and begin building this product and receiving funding, which happened actually during the first half of the year. But that didn't mean that the product went live, and so the adoption will grow further. Like that's just the kickoff at that moment of time, and so we haven't seen many new games growing with traction in 2023. To echo a little bit what Yat was saying, it's something what we're going to see more in 2023, I believe. We've seen the rise and a little, I wouldn't say fall, but more like stabilization of a certain monetization model, such as play to earn, which progressively transform into play and earn, and have many other variations as well, which mean that the industry has started to iterate pretty fast on that model. Doesn't mean that this is the ultimate form of it that we'll see, but it's in the progress of finding what it could become, and as such trigger like a reasonable path of engagement for user and better tokenomics that will not lead toward like zero sum, as we've seen unfortunately with some other games. I think the learning we've seen as well is basically just like any new platform of gaming before, there's been a lot of experimentation, and experimentation keeps coming in. There's been simple gameplays that's been brought to life, mostly casual game, breeding game, fighting games, but ultimately the overall feedback from the industry is like they were games that were not fun enough versus today's standards. And so it means, and I think that's a great recognition of the industry. We just made a survey of the members from the Blockchain Game Alliance, more than 500 members, and 51% of them agree that games needs to be more fun in their mechanics to keep retaining and engaging users beyond by the tokenomics or the play-to-earn side. And this is a key reminder that at the end of the day, it's all about the product, the tech itself, and the fun, before even the other incentive that blockchain can provide.
Makes sense. Yeah, thanks. Matt, would you agree with that, or do you have something to?
I echo the same sentiment. I think the biggest thing that I've seen in the last year and a half is that we're seeing a lot less people coming at gaming from the blockchain side in terms of coming into the space. So just look at ourselves. We went and hired somebody who'd had a couple of exits from a gaming perspective. to come into the business, to start a business internally, to then look to spin that out. And the key kind of the mechanism of the thought process around that was a person coming from gaming, understands what Sebastien says around what makes good gameplay. And if you can start to create games that have good gameplay that people want to play, by virtue of that, the other rewards that might come with it as part of the digital asset play then start to become quite significant. And I think from a kind of a Web3 ethos perspective, if you can start to kind of show value, not only going to the person that's, I guess, creating and publishing the games, but also distribute that to the people who are playing the games as well, from a community standpoint, you start to see the kind of the growth there. And then the other thing from our perspective that we're looking at quite hard, we're starting to see a lot more people thinking about, is the distribution aspect as well. So very much from our perspective, we've got partnerships, I think, with 3 esports teams in Europe, Ninjas in Pajamas, RRQ in Indonesia, and Mad Lions in Spain. And a big thing around that is driving activations back to the games to drive awareness into a massive gaming population. So I think we're going to start to see the marketing and the community effects growing with that. And also from a blockchain perspective, we're starting to see other games and other chains coming to kind of want to work with us as well to start to leverage that distribution. So I think the market effect aspect needs to kind of be there. And I think we're here in Davos and it's all about kind of everyone's distributed, maybe not working together. I think as an industry, I think in gaming, it needs to be the same. I think we want everyone to be successful in this space. So that'd be my take.
As an NFT analytics provider, like, what was your experience or exposure, specifically in that context, into the gaming industry within the last 12 to 24 months?
Okay, yeah, maybe I start with an opinion here. You started with the reminiscence about arcade games and what we used to do when we were a child. I guess the gaming industry with respect to blockchain is somewhere in that stage, right? It's like an arcade gaming. It's more two-dimensional and a lot of interaction is very limited. And we are trying to sell that to an audience who are now growing up with games that are built with Unreal Engine and games that are very realistic, close to life, right? Lifelike. And so the biggest challenge is how do we bridge this? 2022, I mean, with the end of 22, towards the second half of 2021, we saw a lot of success that pushed a lot of gaming projects in 2022. But then everyone was majority. I don't want to take away those who are trying to still, break this wall. But most of the games were more focused towards like the sense of arcade, if I can relate to, what we used to, right? But then trying to sell it to a crowd which is already, into Fortnites and they are into realistic world. I think this is what we have seen in 2022, and that's probably one reason why games have failed to attract the gamers. Right now, games, what we have seen based on analytics is it's mostly traders, speculation and traders who are in this industry, and they are the ones who are trying to get into the project, but not the real gamers. They are few and far here and there. But I think this is what needs to change. 2023, 2024, we should start focusing on how do we make sure blockchain and Unreal Engine can coexist. How do we bring that together and hopefully bring all the billions of dollars, $200 billion game industry, maybe we can take a slice of that into blockchain. I guess if I remember reading the kind of projections, it's like 50 billion in 2025 or so. So maybe let's all build together and make that reality.
Tim, you have as a service provider, you have a lot of exposure to gaming companies and also gaming publishers. So maybe adding to the point from Gopi, how do you, because you see more in the market and you see things earlier than most people in terms of what's actually being built right now from a game developer perspective. So like adding to Gopi's points, like how do you right now like see the projects being developed in terms of the quality of games, and maybe also regarding the time range, like what can what types of, like, when can gamers expect more fun-driven games, and what's the timeline based on your observation in the market for that?
So me personally, I am both patient and impatient at the same time. I would have expected like 2022 to be the year that real games were going to be launching, so I was hoping for that. I do think 2023, 24 will actually be the time that will happen. When we're sitting and talking to the startups that are interested in using our products, we see that they're very, very much becoming mature. Their token economics is at a far higher state than like 2-3 years ago. They know how to think about community building. They know how to think about the stakeholder ecosystem. And a lot of that is thanks to the work of Yat and Seb, right? Because they're like the pioneers showing as in what you should be doing as a game studio and as a Web3-backed company. One thing that also surprised me when your original question of 2022 is I see a lot of blockchain networks going into subnets or private chains for specific use cases. And this is something where it is also a little bit dangerous, in my opinion, because what we're doing is we're trying to make it as simple as possible for mainstream and mass adoption. But that also means that we have to take care of more blockchain networks and layers at the same time to make it possible. So then there's going to be a lot more need in bridging and support, so that in the end that you can go from game X to Y to Z, because all of them are living on not only different chains, but also subnets on those chains.
So, I mean, we already touched upon this a bit, but if we compare like what happens in blockchain space, in particular in blockchain gaming space, with if we walk over for like what happens in the AI industry, right? With years and years of having a reputation of like, oh yeah, great use cases are going to come, and like for years and years, most consumers or businesses like patiently waiting, and then having like the ChatGPT moment when suddenly you break this barrier of an intense product market fit product that just suddenly, or to an end consumer might seem almost magical, just appears and has increasing like, or has like really rapid adoption in a very short amount of time. If we compare this type of, not the AI innovation itself, but more like the moment of like this radical breakthrough, and compare this to like this particular industry, do you have a particular idea or perspective on what this could look like? So we already, for example, talked about game quality. Could this be triggered by just very specific games that suddenly reach a certain quality that, oh, like mainstream or like casual gamers feel super appealed to, even though they didn't have had exposure to crypto yet? Or is it other technological features? And Sebastien, since you built like a large open world game, what's your perspective on that?
All right, so I think we have to look at why suddenly AI and ChatGPT, among many other solutions, Stable Diffusion, etc., have suddenly grown so fast in 2022. And at the core is because the models and those solutions have been open sourced, and then everyone could contribute to other models to make them much better, improve on them, etc. I feel like if we try to make a comparison with blockchain gaming, the metaverse and user-generated content, to some extent, will have this similar pattern. There will be a moment where a lot more creators will be leveraging those platforms and those tools, which are, for most of the decentralized gaming, are no code or very accessible in the way that allow people to make games. And the explosion of content, the refining of the model we're going to find into them will create new format of experiences that we don't find on other platforms. Will be also empowered behind through like the incentive toward the creator economy, because in your introduction you were mentioning the rise of Roblox, Minecraft, Fortnite, just to give a few examples. Those platforms have been growing by capturing the value from the creator who contributed to their success, and that's, I think, the main thing that the gaming industry is moving forward. Like we're seeing, like all the top titles have some sort of user-generated content content feature, allowing users at some level to create their own level, their own characters. I think that we're definitely heading that way, that gamers want to be creators, they want to be contributors, they want to make their own level, their own content, and ultimately they will, and we've seen that in Sandbox about 10 years ago, they will leave the game that do not reward them properly for all that time they devote and that value they contribute toward. By network effect, the other platform that on the opposite side have integrated the concept of true digital asset ownership from the beginning and reward the creator with 95% of the value they bring will really kick off, and we'll see an acceleration beyond.
I think from my perspective, we are looking for that Uber moment. I think blockchain crypto is still super difficult to actually enter it. I think if you had everyone in the audience here who's got tokens of different denominations, I'd ask you to ask how many of you actually deploy and use those tokens. It's probably not that many. So I think for me, the moment that I would like to see is being able to onboard into a blockchain game in a seamless way, which might not talk specifically to the kind of the full ethos of Web3, having your own kind of trustless wallet and everything else, but I think we need to try and get people from the old world into this world in an easy way, and without that ability to kind of manage wallets in a kind of really easy kind of process, is going to be very challenging. So from my perspective, we need people pushing the barriers on one hand from a full Web3 perspective, but we also need other people in the industry coming at it from the 2.5, 2.6, 2.7 to try and help educate people into what is possible. But then also, obviously, within that, then they'll start to become and educate themselves around what the opportunity is around earning, around ownership, and what that actually means from a digital asset perspective.
I mean, when it comes to innovation, then usually the reputation or the kind of pattern is for industries that usually innovation comes from new players rather than incumbents. When it comes to Web3 and gaming, to me it seems sometimes from the outside maybe gaming works a little bit different than other industries because it's also like way younger and it's way more tech driven by default. We have seen some of the big publishers like Ubisoft or Square Enix or others like who tried with like their first exposure. Ubisoft actually had one of their like top 10 flagship games even where they had an NFT project last year. Ended in a total disaster. Some might argue it's because gamers don't like NFTs. Me as a gamer, I would argue because I think most gamers just don't like Ubisoft. And I remember like 10 years ago when it was free-to-play business models, it was pretty much the same vibe from the consumer side. But for you, Tim, like looking to also...
maybe just a note on Ubisoft. So first thing, like don't necessarily trust whoever shouts the louder. Like gamers and a certain category of press in gaming tend to depict a bad side of the story, but they are not necessarily like the voice of all gamers in general. And the second about Ubisoft, like that has been one of the top 10 most popular experience in Sandbox with the rabbits. So they explored other ways to integrate in Web3, and so far I think it's been pretty successful for them.
So do you think they, some of these big players like Ubisoft, as you just said, will succeed in being the early adopters of Web3 and gaming?
Ubisoft was one of the founding members of the Blockchain Game Alliance, so they always, from the very beginning, shown their interest toward the technology. I think Yves Guillemot, when he was asked to picture what are some of the three main things that will change the future, he talked about like NFTs and blockchain, control, sort of new haptic control, and I think AI as well. And that was in 2018 when I was pitching Sandbox for the first time with blockchain. So I can feel he was visionary already at that time. It's just like it's a larger company, so it takes more time for them to deploy this kind of experiment and try to be successful. And they have like an existing user base while we start more from scratch. So sometimes that can be an advantage or a little disadvantage if you don't deploy the right efforts to educate the audience, like you were just rightly pointing out.
And Tim, like, what's your experience in regards to this? Like talking to dozens of different like Web3 publishers, game publishers or developers. Like, does it match also with what you see in the market?
What we really need to understand, and Gartner Hype Cycle is a really useful tool to see it. if you look at blockchain technology at the hype cycle, Gartner has circles, triangles, squares to depict how long it will actually go through the hype cycle and how long it will take. And blockchain has always been plus 10 years. So when the hype cycle about blockchain and smart contracts started out, they predicted this is going to take 10 plus years before there is actually adoption. We need to understand two really big things. One, that is blockchain is very complicated. It's very disruptive, but it's not just a technological shift. It's also a shift in business model. And you cannot just take a Web2 game and project it into Web3 because it's a very different business model. And if you then want to say, I want to take an existing game, which is primarily monetizing against the consumer, it doesn't really create a digital economy peer-to-peer, as in value transfer from player to player. That is something that the game studios need to incorporate in their gameplay. And I predict it's going to be easier either to have a separate game instead of building on top of the existing Web2 game, because then you're just going to hurt yourself and your own community.
We're a little bit short of time, so I would suggest we wrap up the session, and I would like to ask each of you, for everyone who's in the room, and I mean, a lot of hands were raised in the beginning for who is a gamer, but anyhow, what do you think is like what you're looking forward for 2023 and 2024, like short to midterm specifically? What do you think people here today should take away when it comes to Web3 and gaming? Do you want to start, Sebastien?
Well, like I mentioned, like I believe again, like the future of gaming in general is all towards user-generated content, and we're going to see an acceleration of that. More and more games in the top 10 grossing mobile games are leveraging those features. I think in general, the industry, and from again this report that we mentioned from the Blockchain Game Alliance, people and the developer, the member, they've put a bigger focus on like asset ownership and gameplay and fun. So now that we have identified the key issues and we're working on them, I think with it as well with the market condition that allows to be more focused on those aspects, we'll maybe see more results in the short to mid-term. We rightly pointed out that a growing number of members and a growing number of existing companies have been onboarding. That's something like we were 300 members last year, now 500 members now at the BGA. That shows like it's pretty healthy. Something as well I didn't mention, but even the market has been in more of like crypto winter, like people say, the adoption of the game, the engagement of users, number of DAU, of MAUs, the volume of NFT transaction didn't decline. So maybe there's been a little cleanup around like the category of users who were more trader and speculator. But underlying, I think the fundamentals are still there. The people who came initially for those games got hooked into them. They are still there and playing. And the greater diversity of gameplays we're going to find, the greater audience we will reach, and so I don't see any potential decline into that curve of adoption.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, the caliber of people coming into the space from the gaming industry is massive, from a developer, game economy perspective. And if you see where the talent goes, typically you're going to start to see some good results. So from my perspective, I'm super bullish in terms of what we're building out with this kind of gaming studio that we've built. I think from our perspective, getting that game live, and I think that's the key thing for the space. There's a lot of people come and talk about hype, and as an industry, we often do the hype and actually don't deliver enough product. So I think for me, what I'd like to see more of in the next year or so is people kind of having that resiliency, doing what they say they're going to do, and let's get some good use cases that when we can come back to sessions like that, people can actually kind of look at the stats, look at the revenue numbers, look at the projections, and look at the equity opportunity that generally definitely exists in the space because it is massive. So, yeah.
2023 and 2024, I think it's very important for gaming from the regulatory perspective. I think that's for general crypto, not just for gaming, but since this is a panel about gaming, focusing on gaming. I think, it's a lot of experimentation, right? That's what happens. Every new industry goes through the cycle of experimentation, and there's always challenges, and you always have bad actors in there. So the important thing I hope the regulators take into consideration is first principle thinking. They don't try to just take, I have some regulations for financial instrumentation. Let me just take it and apply it for NFTs or apply it for utility tokens, because that's going to fail, because that's not the same. It's apples to orange comparison. So I hope 2023, 2024 regulators who obviously are looking into regulating the market, they take a first principle approach, and then look into it as a new asset class, and then make sure they consult people like Sebastien and others who are into this category, and then make sure that these regulations don't kill innovation, because that's more important. If we have, regulations that are built for industries that have gone 60 years, that will not be sustainable for an industry that is just few years, right? So that's going to be something important to watch for 2023 and 2024.
Yeah, so right now we're still in blockchain gaming. So we all take into account that we sacrifice UX because it is blockchain gaming. Where we need to go is having blockchain back in the back seat, where in the end you can say, oh, by the way, it's a game on blockchain. All the transactions are happening through the technology layer. But that's where we need to work towards. That's where we need to push towards. Venly, we do like the two types of services, as in we have the marketplace, but also the widget solution, where we can say, okay, it is still intrusive, but you can go into and use it a little bit more easier as a non-crypto native. But in fact, what we're building and what we're more excited about are everything on the API layer, because then we're not creating a breaking interface. We're helping the game studio to then say, okay, I want to create the ideal seamless interface using the blockchain technology through an underlying service that can help me build the game the way that I want to. It'll take a couple of more years, but I'm sure we'll get there.
Fantastic. Then that's it for our session. Thanks a lot for being here. Thanks for sharing your insights. Yeah, sure.
So, yes, two considerations. First, like creating an IP from scratch and co-creating it with the community. In that case, I think like that's the ideal scenario, and the technology is there, and there are platforms. At least I know one in France, which I can introduce you to if you're interested, where like you can write as a DAO, like the story script, the characters, the design, and every contributor towards all those different roles can be also rewarded as part of like how they contributed toward the final result, as well as I would say the end consumer, the fan who reads or consumes the IP. In that case, it's a great scenario. In the other case, where it's an existing IP, typically here we're talking about Star Wars and Disney, it cannot be the Wild West. We have to also be respectful of the creators and the existing copyrights and intellectual property, meaning like we have to work with Disney and getting the proper agreement to use and license the IP, but in a way that they accept co-creation, user-generated content. That's what we do in Sandbox, typically, that we partner with more than 400 brands, and we educate them on the benefit of user-generated content as the ultimate form of fan engagement. And it's like that's the most powerful way to engage users, to give them a voice, to make them contribute, expand the universe. We did that with The Walking Dead, for example, by Robert Kirkman, and we'll have a lot of exciting brands. Today we announced Okuto no Ken, Feast of the North Star, for example, if you've been much into the Japanese culture. So we go broadly into entertainment and popular license like that.
All right, thanks. I would cut it short here. Thanks a lot, everyone. Thanks for being here, and thanks for your insights. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Julius, you want to take the photo?